Okay, so I'm here with Chris Sanderson, Strategy and Insight Director from the Future Laboratory, who's given us an extremely insightful trend briefing. And I thought we'd start off with the aspect of design.
Mm-hmm.
If you just briefly could give us an insight on what is happening within design in the nearest future.
Well, I think one of the big shifts that we've seen, and we certainly saw it coming back from Sanderson.mov from the Milan Furniture Fair a couple of weeks ago, is the real refocus on what it means to be lean, to actually be trying to think very carefully about your product from the bottom up. So thinking about cost, thinking about margins, thinking about how you redesign utility and flexibility into a product. And that, I think, is both in terms of as a structure, as an organization, but also as a designer. So we've seen lots of work, I think, that has been about thinking about a reappraisal of utility. Lots of interesting examples of new modular furniture coming through again. But all of it, I think, revolving around this idea of what flexibility and what utility is going to mean in the years to come.
And it also seems like we're going more into a flow of less is more.
Without a doubt. So one of the other expressions we've been using is fewer but better. We have been through a process over the last 10 years where home product, for example, has almost become as seasonal as fashion, as fashionable as fashion, which most of us, I think, would realise just doesn't make sense. We cannot continue to produce home product as if it was fashion clothing and could be thrown out with the same kind of regularity. It just doesn't make any sense, and it just won't work on the kind of resources that we have, the finite resources that we have as a planet. So I think we're already beginning to see, certainly in developed countries, the beginnings of a slowdown in terms of consumption. That's not going to happen overnight, however. It is something that will happen over the next decade and beyond. So it's not as if we're going to see an immediate change in terms of consumer consumption habits, but I think we will see the shift in the way that organic as a movement, fair trade as a movement within food, started off being a very niche, very small philosophy or trend back in the late 80s and into the 90s, and has taken 10 or 15 years to really become something that most mainstream consumers now think of as something that they want from their food shopping basket.
And it also seems, during the seminar at least, it's going a lot from globalization to sort of localizing. How do you think the shift from global companies, how are they going to be able to really localize themselves?
Well, technology actually provides us with the answers, and that's what's most interesting about it, which is that, again, we often think that being local means to go back, to become more old-fashioned, to become more simple, to become more low-tech. And whilst that might be the case, clearly technology is the one thing that also enables us to be supremely local. And that's really what all the buzz about mobile apps is, for example, which is that what they suddenly give you is the opportunity to let other people know, to let brands know, to let organizations know exactly where you are at this point in time, which means that they can either tell you where your friends are so you can meet up with them, or it can tell you about the opportunities you have in your area to go and see a movie, go to a gallery, explore a show, go to a retailer and find the product that you've been looking for but not been able to find in another store. All of these things that are location-based change our sense of, well, if I'm here, what's round the corner? And the ability of technology to tell you what's around the corner is radically changing our sense of the bigger picture and the smaller picture.
And what about thinking for the retailers? What are your sort of 3 or 5 suggestions how they can adapt to this sort of technology to best reach out to the consumers?
I think for a lot of retailers it is a challenge because location-based phone technology is challenging the one area that they thought was sacrosanct, their store, because it's actually opened the store up to comment and criticism from the everyday user. You walk into a store now and you can turn on a mobile app like Foursquare and suddenly have this barrage of comment and pointers and flags and tags that other people have put in that store. So the store is now covered in virtual graffiti, as it were. So the one space that retailers thought was theirs that no one could touch is actually now being changed by the consumer. Everything is very consumer driven and consumer related. So I think that's probably the first thing. If as a brand, as a retailer, you can't understand how your consumer is now driving change, then you're not understanding change. The next point would be that if you're not retailing successfully online, then you're already 2 steps behind, because your consumer is now using the mobile phone to engage with brands that can retail or do retail and are buying product on their phone. So we really have to think very carefully about the appropriate platform for talking to and retailing with our consumers. We've got to understand how the technology will work for us, how the technology, for example, will suddenly enable us to know who our customer is. That if the customer wants to tell us that they're walking through the door and that I'm a repeat customer, they'll tell us. And they might be happy to share with us their entire back catalogue of previous purchases with that store. So that person might walk through the door of H&M and say, well, I'm a committed H&M shopper. I'm normally in an H&M shop once a week. Last week I bought this pair of trainers. This week I'm going to buy, I'm thinking about buying a pair of jeans. We are talking about these issues. We're talking about them on our social network sites. We're already creating wish lists of things we want to buy. It really is a case of, as a retailer, are you listening to what your consumer is telling you?
And to summarize it all, what would you say the 5 main trends, whether it's design, architecture, living, housing, what would that be in sort of the decade to come?
Well, for us, first of all, it's getting ready for a decade of change. So we've already coined the expression turbulent teens to describe this decade. It's a decade of change. It's a decade of turbulence. It's a decade where everything's going to behave like a teenager. Ups and downs, highs and lows. Nothing will be regular. Nothing will play itself out in the organized fashion that we've come to expect with progress. So we have to get ready for change. We've got to get ready for change that often seems to be quite difficult, that seems to be up and down and all over the place. So that's number 1, get ready for change. Number 2, I think, is that part of that change is that we have to become leaner. We've got to be fitter. We've got to be flexible. We've got to be able to cope with change. We've got to do better with less. And that becomes, I think, also very important. Next, I think we've got to be prepared for the fact that consumers no longer want to behave like consumers. And I think many consumers now don't necessarily treat brands in the way that we think they should. And many of them have grown up in worlds that aren't defined by brands in the way that we may have thought about brands. So, if you talk to many teenagers today, they're not actually very interested in mainstream brands. They're interested in brands that their friends have made and have created online. And we're already seeing the way in which large manufacturers are starting to realize this and are kind of saying to small micropreneurs, people doing their own thing online, hey, we can help you. You want to make a small t-shirt collection, we'll make them for you, we'll help them print you. You've got your idea, we'll help make it become a reality. And so the competitor of the future of the next generation isn't the big box brand sitting next to you on the high street. It's the 300 small brands that I can find online who will actually offer a real challenge to my brand over the next 10 years. And then I think, finally, I think it's that we have to understand that the whole consumption process is about to change and is changing, that we can no longer expect it just to be about the online experience or the traditional bricks and mortar experience. It's becoming so much more integrated, and new technology that's constantly evolving will continue to challenge the way that we interact with brand. And that increasingly most of us might not even want to buy product that is real, that's solid, that in the way that we engage with Facebook or Flickr or MySpace, these are things that we have, that have meaning in our lives and that are very important and give us value. And increasingly, we'll pay for those. And that's where we'll make money. We won't make money from making solid things anymore. We'll become less obsessed with solid things.
So one could say that the future is bright, but
we
turbulent.
Hope so. We hope so. Turbulent and problematic, definitely. But I think it will be a decade that will challenge us. But out of that will come opportunities that I think will really maybe shape the rest of the century.
Well, we look forward to that, and thank you very much.
Thank you.